Hello, my friends. Welcome to this second of our Lenten devotions, talking about hope, the hope that we derive from the resurrection of Jesus on Easter. Before we go any farther, I want to back up just a little bit and cover a very important piece of this hope that we have. And it starts with reflecting on something that St. Paul tells us. But I've got to ask you a question first. Think of your answer to this question. If you were to tell someone the most important thing that they need to know about Christianity, what would you tell them? What's the most important thing about the Christian faith that someone needs to know? Do you have in mind what it is? Paul talks about that in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. For what I received, Paul writes, for what I received I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures. The primary thing that Paul wants to talk about, the primary thing that people need to know about the Christian faith is that, yes, Jesus died, but that he rose, that he's alive. Jesus died, but Jesus is alive today. For Paul, that was the most important thing to know. Everything else flowed from that. Why is this important? Well, our faith is based not simply on a philosophical concept. It's not based on good laws. It's not based on important teachings. It's based on a person and what that person did. It's based on Jesus and that he rose from the grave. Everything else that we believe derives its power. Everything that we teach derives its power from the life of Jesus. There's lots of there's lots of evidence to support the Jesus resurrection. Paul goes on in 1 Corinthians 15 and says that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Peter, and then to the 12, and after that to 500 more people all at once. And as if you have a question, and Paul writes that if you have a question about that, he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers at the same time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep. Paul says there are 500 eyewitnesses. If you don't believe what I'm telling you, go back and ask them yourself. They'll tell you they saw Jesus alive. Paul wrote this letter about 25 years after the events of the crucifixion and resurrection. So it's not unreasonable to believe that there are still people alive in the Jerusalem area and Judea who saw it, who witnessed it, and who talked to Jesus personally after his resurrection. It would be as if someone questioned whether or not 9/11 happened. That was about 25 years ago, 23 years ago. You can go to New York today, and you'd find plenty of people that were eyewitnesses to those events of that day. It's the same kind of time frame. Paul is telling us the most important thing that we need to know, the primary thing that we need to understand about our faith, is that Jesus is alive. The Gospels go on and give all kinds of evidence for that. If you read through the Gospel accounts of the resurrection, go back and do that and look at some of the details that are there. They're little details that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see. I think maybe one of the most surprising things, or one of the most important details for me, is just how surprised people are. People don't come out of the grave. People don't come back to life. And in every one of the Gospels, it's clear that's not what anybody was expecting to happen. The disciples on the road to Emmaus don't recognize Jesus. Why would they? They weren't expecting to see him. They don't recognize Jesus because people don't come back from the grave. But when they did, like we talked about last week, it was life-changing because it brought the hope of life. The bottom line I want to communicate today is as we talk about this hope that we have, as we talk about the hope of Easter, we're basing that hope on a historical event, on a fact that happened. We're basing it on the eyewitness testimony that people have given to us, that yes, Jesus was crucified, but he's not dead, he's alive. And on that fact of primary importance, everything else hangs. We'll come back again later this week and we'll talk about what that means again. I look forward to visiting with you again. God be with you. Bye.